ایک اور
محمد وعلی محمد
ایک اور
اللہم صلی علی محمد وعلی محمد
اللہ دکھائے نہ برا در کا جنازہ اللہ دکھائے نہ برا در کا جنازہ شبیر کے کانوں پہ شابر کا جنازہ اللہ دکھائے نہ برا در کا جنازہ تابوت کے اندر یہ نہیں لاش حسن کی تابوت کے اندر یہ نہیں لاش حسن کی یہ ایک جنازہ ہے بھرے گھر کا جنازہ دکھائے نہ برا در کا جنازہ زینب یہ بکا کرتی تھی لاش سے لپٹ کر زینب یہ بکا کرتی تھی لاش سے لپٹ کر پہلے نہ اٹھا بھائی سے خاطر کا جنازہ اللہ دکھائے یا شیر خدا بیٹے کی میت کو بچا لو یا شیر خدا بیٹے کی میت کو بچا لو ہے تیروں کی بوچھار میں دل بل کا جنازہ اللہ دکھائے نہ برا دل کا جنازہ شبیر کے کانوں پہ شابر کا جنازہ
محمد وعلی محمد اللہم صلی علی محمد وعلی محمد
حضرت امام حسن تمہارے سے بھی چند منصور فاتحہ
بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم
ہاں دوستو یہ وقت ہے اندومن کا ماتم ہے جگر بندے شہر کے لشکن کا زہرا نے کیا چاک گریبان کفن کا سر کھول دو اب اٹھتا ہے تابوت حسن کا حیدر بھی بکا کرتے ہیں زہرا و نبی بھی عباس بھی روتے ہیں حسین ابن علی بھی عباس بھی روتے ہیں حسین पर पीट के ये शोर मचाया, मैं क्या करूं लोगों मुझे किस्मत ने सताया, बेरहमों ने भैया को मेरे जहर पिलाया, किस तरह बचेगा असदुल्लाह का जाया, बस हो गया मालूम के सामा है सफर के, देखो तो लगन भर गया टुकड़ों से जिगर के, देखो तो लगन भर गया टुकड़ों के जिगर के, शबीर तड़पने लगे दस्तार पटक कर, नजदीक था दम तन से निकल जाए फड़क कर, बहने जो बिरादर के लिए रोई बिलग कर, नाले थे के सीनों पे गिरी बात कड़क कर, ज़ैनब का ये नाहा था के ये क्या हुआ लोगों, माँ जाया मेरा बेकसो तन्हा हुआ लोगों, माँ जाया मेरा बेकसो तन्हा हुआ लोगों, आसिम का भी नन्हा सा गरेबान फटा है, हैदर के मुहिबों में भी एक हश्र बका है, दुश्मन भी तड़पते हैं वो फरियाद बुका है, ताबूते हसन रोज़े अहमद को चला है, मातम में नहीं होश बजा अब तो किसी के, अमामा नहीं सर पे हुसैन ने अली के, अमामा नहीं सर पे हुसैन ने अली के, हमराह है अंसारो महाजिर भी खुले सर, ज़ैनब भी है कुलसूम भी ओढ़े हुए चादर, नागाह पुकारी कोई बीबी ये तड़प, ऐ उम्मतियों रहम करो मेरे पिसर पर, मैयत पे सुने हैं ये सितम चरखे कहान के, अब तीर बरसते हैं जनाजे पे हसन के, अब तीर बरसते हैं जनाजे पे हसन के, हाँ दोस्त तो ये वक्त है।
Begin by reciting Surah Al-Fatiha for all Muslimin. For all those Muhammadi and Labet who do not have recited Surah Al-Fatiha. Let us also recite Dua al-Shifa, the Dua al-Sihat for all of those who are in need, especially Altaf, Hussain, Muhammad Abbas Rizvi, as well as Sarwat Razi. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
عما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء 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 صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، سيدنا ونبينا وشفيعنا بالقاسم محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من يومنا هذا إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتبارك وتعالى في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لقد كان لكم في رسول الله أسوة حسنة. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. محمد وعجل.
Firstly, I would like to issue an apology on behalf of the organizers that given yesterday's weather conditions, the Majlis here had to be cancelled just given the situation here. And we apologize for those who were not aware of these changes or we could not get contact with in time enough to tell them. And I know I'm aware that some people ended up coming here when there was no Majlis yesterday. So on behalf of the organizers of these Majalis, we really all are organizers, but we would like to apologize for any inconvenience that was caused by that. Today, in this weekend, inshallah, we commemorate the Shahadat of Imam Hussain alayhi salam.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
And at the same time, we commemorate the passing of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa
صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Which is why this verse that I have chosen is particularly relevant. This is a verse from Surah Al-Ahzab. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. It's a verse that says that indeed in your Prophet there has been the best of example. The best example. It's the way that we are supposed to live our lives. And I read a previous majlis on this topic of this verse. But it's especially relevant given the significance of this weekend. Given the significance of the individuals whom we come to commemorate. That Rasulullah is indeed an example for every aspect of our lives. Whether that's the way we conduct ourselves in public or with other people, whether that's the way we treat the environment, or the animals, or anything. Rasulullah is the best example for us to follow in all of this. So how does one follow Uswatun Hasana? How does one follow the greatest example that the Prophet left for us? One of the ways is through following the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. And it's evident that this is one of the ways of following the example of the Prophet, because when we read Hadith Kisa, and in Hadith Kisa, we find that Rasulullah himself says, "Lahmuhum lahmi, wa damahum dami." They're my flesh is their flesh my flesh, their blood is my blood. Innahum minni wa ana minhum, he says as well. They're from me and I am from them. So more certainly, if we are to understand the Ahlul Bayt, that gives us an insight into that example that Rasulullah himself left behind for us. And we all know that in his final journey back from Hajj, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi,
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
he says that he's leaving behind two things: Kitab Allah, the book of Allah, wa itrati ahlu bayti, and my family, the Ahlul Bayt. So what do we learn from this? We learn that not only when Rasul says innahum minni wa ana minhum, he doesn't just mean that the Ahlul Bayt are his progeny. He means that his conduct and that his legacy and the way that he conducted himself as an individual lives through the Ahlul Bayt. And that if we're to understand the Ahlul Bayt, we understand what that Uswatun Hasana really means. And it's especially relevant given the Shahadat of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. And if you look at what the historians say about this Imam, they say that this Imam resembled his grandfather not only in his looks, but in his form, his manner, and his nobility. But forget the historians for one moment. Rasulullah himself would say that. In 7 or 8 years, Imam Hassan alayhi salam was 7 or 8 years when Rasulullah left this world. But even in those 7 or 8 years, Rasulullah would say many times, not just one time, many times, that, "Oh Hassan, you resemble my form and my manner." So therefore, our second Imam is the embodiment of Uswatun Hasan, of that same example that Rasulullah is for us. That in fact, Imam Hassan alayhi salam was that person who, he had that social standing. He was considered somebody with a commanding presence. He was somebody who was so charismatic that even the enemies, when they would listen to Imam Hassan's speech, and it would finish, when Imam Hassan would finish speaking, they would wish they could hear some more from him. The enemies of Ahlul Bayt would wish that they could hear more from him. They were sad when the speech of the Imam had ended. And one of the major takeaways from the life of Imam Hassan alayhi salam is the generosity and how we must implement that kind of generosity in our lives. For example, there's one instance when the Imam was passing through the street and there were some poor people on the ground, they were eating bread. And they said, "Yabna Rasulullah, please join us." Now Imam Hassan alayhi salam, what he does is he dismounts, he joins them, he eats bread. And notice how, normally one of us, if somebody who is less fortunate than us asked us to eat with them, we wouldn't really want to take from them, right? We don't really want to take from them. But what Imam Hassan alayhi salam does, he eats alongside them to make sure that, he has the empathy. He doesn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. He doesn't want to make that person who has less means than him to feel lower. So Imam Hassan eats alongside them, but after that, what he does is he says, "Come with me." He takes them with him, he gives them food and clothes. So not only does Imam Hassan show that empathy and not hurt the feelings of those individuals, but on top of that, he shows generosity. He follows that with generosity. And if you look, there's multiple, you can read through books just where there's instance after instance after instance of just the generosity of Islam. And there's a time when somebody asked Imam, they said, "Oh Imam, I need money, I don't have, I'm in need." Imam Hassan alayhi salam says, "Write down how much you need and give me that number, and I will fulfill your need." The man writes the number down. He gives it to the Imam. The Imam gives him double what he asked. He just give him what he asked. Normally when we're asked to give somebody a certain amount of money, we give them exactly what they need, right? We match exactly their need. Imam Hassan doubled it. And the people around him said, "Imam, why are you doubling this? The amount he asked was enough already. If you just given that would do. There was no need for more." But Imam Hassan alayhi salam says that wouldn't do justice. Firstly, the reward is more, but it wouldn't do justice to this individual. Why? The reason Imam Hassan alayhi salam gives is really, really important. It's really beautiful, the reason that he gives. He says that when somebody has to ask another person, it means that they've been so demoralized at that point. That they feel that their confidence has gone down. That they feel that they have to go out and ask somebody for money. That they feel, they can't provide for themselves, and therefore, and that feeling of that self-humiliation almost, the lack of self-worth that comes from that. They go to somebody else and ask for it. And Imam Hassan said that those nights that person spends are sleepless. That they cycle between hope and despair, not knowing if the person that they ask will actually give them anything. So just that feeling alone, Imam Hassan said that if I had just fulfilled that number that he gave me, it wouldn't have done justice to that. That's how we have to think. When somebody asks us for money, for example, when people are in need, sometimes we ask a bunch of questions. Where is this money going to go? Show me some proof that it's going there. Question after question, right? And yes, there's a place where transparency makes sense. If you're giving to an organization, for example, you want to know that your money is going there. Absolutely. But the precedent of this Imam is that when somebody would ask, he'd already empathize with them. He'd put himself in their shoes. He'd understand just that feeling of uncertainty, that feeling of having to come and ask somebody else for necessity. He'd understand that feeling. And even there was a time when a Bedouin asked the Imam for money. He said, Imam, I'm in need. The Imam takes his entire, whatever's in his safe, he gives that entire amount of money to the Bedouin. 22,000 dirhams to this individual. That's a lot. That's a lot of money for that time. 22,000 dirhams. And the Bedouin says, Imam, you didn't even let me tell you how much I needed. And you just gave me. And Imam alayhi salam says, that's the way. That's the way that we give. We give before the request is even given. And if you just look, there's instance after instance, as I said before, that even Imam showed this generosity to his enemies, to the people who are enemies of the Ahlul Bayt. We know that famous story of the Syrian man. You know, in Syria, of course, that's where Muawiyah had his government headed. So those people, all they heard was the propaganda of Muawiyah. All they heard was La'an on Amir al-Mu'mineen during the Jummah khutbah. So when this man approaches Imam Hassan, he begins to curse at Imam Hassan. He uses the worst of language, most vulgar language, the worst of insults, attacking Imam Ali. How does Imam Hassan alayhi salam respond? If it was you or me, we would curse right back. We would respond in kind. We would say, we would return exactly plus a little bit more. We would curse at them not only at the level that they cursed at us, but we'd go even worse. Imam Hassan does not do that. What the Imam does instead is he asks him. He says, you look like you're coming from far away. If you need food, I can provide you food. If you need some clothes, I can give you clothes. If you need a place to stay, I can give you some place to stay. That's how we have to approach others as well. That's uswatun hasana. That you have a man who's not only not a supporter of yours, but he's somebody who's a self-proclaimed enemy of you. Yet in response, you show them generosity. That's that uswatun hasana that we're told to follow. And then that behavior, that action is how Imam Hassan alayhi salam gets this individual to begin to love Ahlul Bayt. A lot of times we say we love Ahlul Bayt, we say it with our words. It doesn't convince a single person until you start acting on it. Until you start acting like a true lover of Ahlul Bayt and embodying that uswatun hasana. Then and only then will you actually convince people of the greatness of our Prophet, the greatness of our Ahlul Bayt. There's story after story, as I said before, that there's an instance, for example, when Imam Hassan and Imam Hussain and Abdullah ibn Ja'far, who is the husband of Sayyidah Zainab sallallahu alayhi, that they were on a journey. This is a long journey. Their cargo had been separated from them. So of course they would get thirsty and hungry. It's the desert. So they go and look for somebody that maybe perhaps someone has some water to give them. Maybe somebody has some food to give them. And they come across a tent. And in the tent there's this woman, and they ask her, do you have any water that you can give us? She says, no, I don't have water, but I do have a sheep. You can milk the sheep and drink the milk. So they do just that. They milk the sheep, they drink the milk, and then they ask her, do you have any food that you can provide us? The woman says, no, I don't have food, but that sheep, you can sacrifice the sheep and eat the meat. So they do that. They sacrifice the sheep, they eat the meat, they rest for some time, and they leave. But before leaving, they tell her, they were from the Quraysh. If you ever go to Medina, you see us, we will repay the favor back to you. So there comes a time when the husband of that woman returns. Of course, Imam Hussain, Abdullah ibn Ja'far, they've already left by now. The husband arrives, and he's very angry. Why did you give our sheep to this random person? Just because they said they're from Quraysh, why did you let them slaughter our sheep, drink its milk? So later on, when that woman does end up in Medina, Imam Hassan alayhi salam sees her. He says, do you remember me? You recognize me? The woman says, no, I don't remember who you are. Imam Hassan alayhi salam says that I'm that person who you provided the food and milk to. And she says, and Imam Hassan alayhi salam says, come with me, I will give you, I will repay that favor. So Imam Hassan alayhi salam, remember she gave one sheep's milk. What does Imam Hassan alayhi salam give? 1,000 sheep and 1,000 dinars. And then she says, go to my brother Hussain. She goes to Imam Hussain. Imam Hussain also gives 1,000 sheep and 1,000 dinars. She's then sent to Abdullah ibn Ja'far. Abdullah ibn Ja'far gives 1,000 sheep, 1,000 dinars. This is the generosity of And this generosity was not just for the elite. that Imam alayhi salam would show this generosity to even those people who were in the lowest class of society. There was a slave who was eating bread. He was giving some bread to a dog. He would eat some more bread, he would give some bread to the dog. And Imam alayhi salam says, why are you doing this? What are you doing? The slave says, if I were to eat you, I'd be ashamed if this dog stayed hungry and I was eating. Imam Hussain alayhi salam says, wait here. Stay here for one moment. Imam goes to the master of that slave. He buys the slave and he buys the garden in which that slave would work. He freed the slave and he gave the slave that garden. The generosity of Ali Muhammad was not the type of generosity that was reserved for certain people. It was not reserved for the elites of society, it was there for everybody. Even those people who were in a state of slavery and servitude. The Imams were very generous to them as well. And in addition to this type of generosity that we see, this Uswatun Hasan, right? The conduct of Imam Hussain alayhi salam teaches us generosity. But we should also look toward the worship of Imam Hussain so that we can inform the way that we worship, so that it can change the way that we conduct our worship. They say that Imam Hussain, it's written down that he went on Hajj not one time. One time is hard enough, right? He went on Hajj 25 times on foot between Mecca and Medina. And that's the desert, 280 miles each way. Imam Hussain went on that journey 25 times on foot. Imagine that commitment. And in fact, they say that when Imam Hussain alayhi salam would begin to do wudu for his namaz, he would take the water, he would begin to shake, his face would go pale. I mean, where is that realization for us? That Imam Hussain alayhi salam understood the spiritual realities behind his prayers. He knew who he was going to pray to. We don't know that. We just take the water, we throw it on our face, we put it on our arms, we wipe our head, wipe our feet, and it's over. We move on, we rush through our prayers, and we're done. It's not how Imam Hussain alayhi salam did his prayers. That when you're just taking the water, before even, forget about even starting the prayer yet, Imam Hussain would take the water and he'd already be shaking. Do we even approach our prayers anywhere close to that? Is our level, is our quality of our prayers anywhere even close to that? And it said that whenever anyone would mention Qiyamah, or the grave, or Sirat, or accountability on the Day of Judgment, that the Imam would weep, he would weep just hearing these words. A Ma'soom Imam would weep just hearing about Qiyamah, just hearing about the grave. And where's our understanding of the hereafter? We're here, we get fixated on how much money we make, where our bank account balance is. We get fixated over what kind of car we drive. We're worried about how big our house is. Imam Hussain was worried about the hereafter. As a Ma'soom Imam who committed no sins. We commit sins and we're not even worried about the hereafter. And just, we must understand that this Imam was not somebody who accumulated a lot of wealth. We sit here, we accumulate a lot of wealth. Sometimes that's our end game. Imam Hussain is teaching us that our end is not in this world. Our end is something much, much greater. If we look at how history has taken this Imam and understood this Imam, we find that a lot of historians have not been kind to this Imam. But they portrayed this Imam as a weak individual, as somebody who's only interested in signing off on a treaty so you could leave and take a pension. Astaghfirullah, that's what they believe. But in fact, the Imam signing this treaty, I will go through the reasons why he signed this treaty and why that was the best decision to make at the time. But another false criticism of this Imam is it even comes within our own Shi'i circles as well. It's unfortunate to see this, where people say the Imamat didn't even go through Imam Hussain, therefore he must be, astaghfirullah, inferior to Imam Hussain. Or that he signed off on a treaty and Imam Hussain fought Yazid, therefore Imam Hussain must be inferior. These are all totally untrue and they're misconceptions. But we'll start with addressing this idea that Imamat somehow does not go through Imam Hussain alayhi salam. If we look at the lineage of the Imams, we'll find that the fourth Imam alayhi salam married the daughter of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. And from that marriage, you have the fifth Imam. And from that line, we reach all the way to Imam Sahib al-Asr wal-Zaman.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
So if somebody argues, therefore, that Imamat did not go through Imam Hassan, then they must also agree that the Imams do not have a lineage with Rasulullah. Because if the mother of Imam Hassan and Imam Hussain is sufficient to say that, okay, there is lineage with Rasulullah, then the mother of Imam Baqir alayhi salam must be sufficient enough for us to say that there's lineage to Imam Hassan alayhi salam. So that argument immediately is gone. The other idea, this other misconception, somehow this Imam Hassan alayhi salam was weaker than Imam Hussain. We'll go through the reasons exactly why. Now, Imam Hassan alayhi salam, this treaty was not something that was exactly what the Imam wanted to do per se. It was the circumstances necessitated. Every Imam is under a different set of circumstances. Yes. The circumstances of Imam Hussain alayhi salam's Imamat were different from those of Imam Hassan. If you look at the time of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, Muawiyah was somebody who was not willing to fight the Imam fairly. The way Muawiyah conducted his military operations, the way he handled these issues, was that he would cause discord among the generals of Imam Hussain alayhi salam and among the army of Imam Hassan. What he would do is he would offer large bribes to the generals of Imam Hassan and the military commanders, and they would end up switching over to the side of Muawiyah. They would end up being bribed, either with sometimes up to 1 million dinars was the bribe. They would be offered commanderships in Muawiyah's army. They would be offered governorships sometimes. They would be offered marriage into the Umayyad family. So these people left for worldly reasons. We find that Muawiyah, this is one of the ways in which he caused a lot of issues among the followers of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, that he was able to break them up, that they sold out their love of Ahlul Bayt for this world. And they didn't get this world, they didn't get the hereafter either. Let us never be like that to our Imam, where we sell out to this world, we leave our Imam for worldly possessions. In fact, if we look at the people who were on Imam Hassan's side, there were the true Shias of the Ahlul Bayt. There were also Khawarij. All they were interested in was removing Muawiyah. Imam Hassan would come to power. That's what their thinking was. Imam Hassan would come to power, would betray Imam Hassan after. So they had no investment whatsoever, no interest in the mission of Imam Hassan. No interest in justice, no interest in any of that. There were some people who just wanted the spoils of war. That, okay, we'll destroy Muawiyah's government. After that, we'll take the wealth, we'll take the money, we'll take whatever spoils of war there are, and we'll enrich ourselves with that. And there were some people who just followed because their tribe was following Imam Hassan. If their tribal leader said, okay, we'll go with Imam Hassan's army, they just joined along with their tribal leader. Blind following with their tribal leaders, no interest in actually supporting the Imam of the time. So if Imam had followers like this, how is it then possible that he could take these followers, fight Muawiyah, and without resulting in the killing of so many Shia, without resulting in essentially the destruction of the entire Shia and Ahlul Bayt? It would have been very difficult for the Imam to do. And in fact, when Imam notices that these factions exist, what he does is he gives a sermon. He tries to get people to commit to his cause. And what ends up happening is there's a riot, and they turn on the Imam. So many people turn on the Imam. In fact, one of the Khawarij stabs the Imam in his thigh with a dagger to the point where the blade reaches the bone. Can you imagine the Imam now going later on with these types of people and fighting Muawiyah with that army? It would have killed it would have killed all the lovers of the Ahlul Bayt. There would have been no Karbala, there would have been no Shias for Karbala to happen. He saved your religion and my religion. We are Shias today because of the contributions of Imam Hassan. And even if we look at the numbers on Imam Hassan alayhi salam's side, we say 20,000 people versus Muawiyah's 60,000. But even those 20,000, when 8,000 people leave, that goes down to 12,000. So even the army is outnumbered. Had Imam Hassan undertaken a military campaign and not signed this treaty, it would have resulted in the killing of virtually all the Shia. We would not be Shia today, we would not be sitting in this Majlis today if not for Imam Hassan. So let's not lower this imam to a degree where he's inferior to Imam Hussain. That is just simply untrue. And had Imam Hussain been in that position, he would have done exactly what Imam Hassan did. He would have followed it to the last word. Every last word that Imam Hassan spoke, had Imam Hussain been in that position, he would have said those exact same words. So let's not make this mistake here. And in fact, if we look at the treaty that Imam Hassan alayhi salam signed, that the first item would be that Muawiyah would act in accordance with the Quran and with the Sunnah of Rasul. Another item would be that he would not be able to name any successor after him. So should Muawiyah die, he cannot name Yazid. Rather, Imam Hassan would get the Zahiri Khilafah, and if Imam Hassan were not alive, Imam Hussain would get the Zahiri Khilafah. As we know, Muawiyah did not end up following this. Another one would be that the people would be left in peace. There would be no more warfare among the Muslims. The friends of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the Shias of Amir al-Mu'mineen would no longer be threatened. Their lives, their businesses, their livelihood would no longer be threatened. Their families would be left alone. That there would be no harm on anyone from the family of Rasul. And finally, that Amir al-Mu'mineen's name would no longer be cursed in the Jama'ah. That was a normalized practice under Muawiyah. This treaty had Imam Hassan alayhi salam, the way that it was written, Muawiyah would no longer do this. However, some may ask, why would Imam Hassan alayhi salam sign off on a treaty where he knew Muawiyah would not actually follow through on any of the terms? We know Muawiyah did not follow through on these terms. However, this was in writing, and let there be no doubt that Imam Hassan alayhi salam was the man of integrity, and Muawiyah was the one who violated these elements of the treaty. He was the liar. History knows that. Let there be no doubt that history knows that. And the fact that we say that Imam Hassan alayhi salam is inferior to Imam Hussain, some people say that, unfortunately. It's not like Imam Hassan alayhi salam left Imam Hussain without any sort of sacrifice on the day of Ashura. Of course, multiple of Imam Hassan alayhi salam's sons were killed in Karbala. Of course, we know about Hazrat Qasim alayhi salam, who even said that when asked, "O Qasim, what is death to you?" he said, "Sweeter to me than honey." Can we really question the father of Qasim? There's no way we could do this. When Imam Hassan alayhi salam leaves Kufa, he returns to Medina. As we said before, that Ahlul Bayt are the legacy of Rasul. So of course, the same way people were attracted to the character of the Prophet, they'd be attracted to the character of the Ahlul Bayt as well. So of course, people were attracted to the character of Imam al-Hassan. And this, somebody like Muawiyah would perceive that as a threat. But of course, as we commemorate the Shahadat of Imam Hassan, let's not forget the circumstances in which this Imam was poisoned. This Imam was poisoned by his own wife, who was bribed by Muawiyah for money for marriage to Yazid. And we usually speak about this poisoning of Imam Hassan as if it's one incident. Imam Hassan was not poisoned one time. He was poisoned 7 times. The 7th time, the wife of Imam Hassan poisoned the water that Imam Hassan drank. This was the type of poison that took effect almost immediately. Imam Hassan began to vomit his own blood, that pieces of his liver were coming up. But even in this state, he sees Imam Hussain alayhi salam is crying. He says, "La yawm ka yawmika ya Aba Abdullah." That there's no day like your day, O Aba Abdullah. That even as pieces of his liver are coming out of his mouth, he's telling his brother, "O Hussain, there's no day like your day." Imam Hassan alayhi salam tells his brother, "O Hussain, when that time comes to bury me at the grave of my grandfather, for I deserve to be buried by him. But if they do not let you bury me there, don't cause any bloodshed. Bury me in Baqi instead." So when that time comes, when the janazah leaves the home of Imam Hassan, Imam Hussain seeks to take this janazah to the grave of Rasulullah. But the enemies see that the grandson of Rasul is about to be buried right next to the grave of the Prophet. They don't allow this to happen. They begin to rain arrows on the janazah. 70 arrows hit the janazah of Imam Hassan. 7 arrows pierce the body of the Imam. But Imam lowers the body of his brother into the grave in Baqi. But my heart says, "Oh Mawla, at least you had your brother Hussain there to bury him, to give you a proper ghusl, to take your janazah and bury it in Baqi." But on Asr Ashur,
The headless body of Imam Hussain lies on the khak of Karbala. One by one, the people began to loot the body. One man takes the turban of Imam Hussain. Somebody takes the shoes of Imam Hussain. Somebody takes the shirt of Imam Hussain. One man sees a ring on the finger of Imam Hussain. It's covered in his blood. He tries to remove the ring. It won't move. He takes a dagger from him. And he begins to cut at the finger of the Imam. But that wasn't it. It wasn't over there. Hum Shami Ghariba. Umar ibn Saad says, I need volunteers to come forward to trample over the body. 10 people come forward. 10 horses will trample on the body of Imam Hussain. They say that the sound of the bones of Imam Hussain can be heard breaking under the hooves of the horses. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un.
دفنوں کفن کے لیے قافلہ جا رہا ہے وطن کے لیے قافلہ جا رہا ہے وطن کے لیے قصر ظالم کبھی قید خانہ کبھی نوک نیزہ کبھی تازیانہ کبھی کون سی تھی اذیت جو دی نہ گئی ہر جفا تھی اسیر مہن کے لیے قافلہ جا رہا ہے وطن کے لیے قافلہ جا رہا ہے وطن کے لیے حسین 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 ستوں سے چھٹ کے خنبا رسول کا کرب و بلا سے ہوتا مدینے کو جب چلا اور دور سے جو شہر مدینہ نظر پڑا زینب سی سابرا کا جگر غم سے پھٹ گیا منہ کر کے ماں کی قبر کی جانب یہ دی صدا اماں لوٹ آئی ہوں میں اماں لوٹ آئی ہوں میں داغ دل پر بہتر کے لائی ہوں میں اماں لوٹ آئی ہوں میں اماں لوٹ آئی ہوں میں جب گئے تھے یہاں سے تو گھر تھا بھرا جب گئے تھے یہاں سے تو گھر تھا بھرا گلستان تیرا پھولوں سے آباد تھا گلستان تیرا پھولوں سے آباد تھا ہائے دشت ستم ہائے کرب و بلا لوٹ کر لے گئے سب بھرا گھر میرا سب لٹا آئی تیری کمائی ہوں میں اماں لوٹ آئی ہوں میں اماں لوٹ آئی ہوں میں قاسم و اکبر و اصغر دلربا قاسم و اکبر و اصغر دلربا سب کے سب ہو گئے کربلا میں جدا
سب کے سب ہو گئے کربلا میں جدا. شیر جیسا وہ باس بھائی میرا کٹ گئے ہاتھ سا ہل پہ مارا گیا. لہر پہ بے کفن چھوڑ آئی ہوں میں. اماں لوٹ آئی ہوں میں. اماں لوٹ آئی ہوں میں. چومتی تھی بڑے پیار سے جو گلا. چومتی تھی بڑے پیار سے جو گلا. دشت غربت میں تل سے ہوا وہ جدا. دشت غربت میں تل سے ہوا وہ جدا. ایک قطرہ دمے زب ہمیں نہ سکا. لاڈلا تیرا پیاسا جہاں سے گیا. خون بھرا پیرا ہے ساتھ لائی ہوں میں. اماں لوٹ آئی ہوں میں. اماں لوٹ آئی ہوں میں. بادشاہ برت نہ بڑا حوصلہ. بادشاہ برت نہ بڑا حوصلہ. چھین کر لے گئے چادریں اشکیا. چھین کر لے گئے چادریں اشکیا. ہمارے اہل بیت تیرے رسول خدا. آگ لگتی گئی خاک ہوتا گیا. چلتے خیموں سے عید کو لائی ہوں میں. اماں لوٹ آئی ہوں میں. اماں لوٹ آئی ہوں میں. وہ دلاری سکینہ بھتیجی میری. 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 کھا رہی تھی تماشے میں چپ تھی کھڑی. کھا رہی تھی تماشے میں چپ تھی کھڑی. ہائے رے بے بسی ہائے بے چارگی. وہ ستم جھیلتے جھیلتے مر گئی. شام کی قید میں چھوڑ آئی ہوں میں. اماں لوٹ آئی ہوں میں. اماں لوٹ